As somebody who has been excited about the prospect of engineering gameplay for more than a decade, the fact that Star Citizen Patch Alpha 4.5 brings a first iteration of it to the persistent universe is a more than thrilling prospect. But it's also fair to say that for most players, there is likely to be a steep learning curve about how to actually get the most out of the system, and that's what this video is for, specifically for multi-crew ships. There are timestamps in the video description if you're looking for something specific, and this guide is accurate as at Star Citizen Alpha 4.5 PTU build. If you're new here, I'm Forrester, and this YouTube channel is all about giving you useful or interesting videos around simulation type games, including Star Citizen. And if this sort of video is helpful, you might like to subscribe to the channel so that YouTube knows to show you more videos like this in future. So let's start by covering what engineering is all about, and really there are two main roles. The first is power management, and the second is damage control. In the classic MMO context, power management is about buffing your ship to perform as optimally as possible for your situation, and damage control is about healing your ship from damage. Both of these are important and popular roles for support type players, and they're also quite cerebral, which is why engineering appeals to me personally. These are two distinct roles, although in many ships and situations may both be done by the same person, in the same way that in many smaller ships, a co-pilot is also a turret gunner, for example. For the sake of simplicity, for the rest of this guide I will refer to the power management role as the engineer, and the damage control role as, well, damage control. The reason for that may become obvious as we get into the guide. At its best, engineering gameplay gives an edge in combat, but also means that a competent crew can rescue a ship that is otherwise all but dead and have it limp home to be fixed up again. So let's start by covering what you'll need in order to get started with multi-crew engineering in Star Citizen. The engineer will need an engineering terminal, which is present on many multi-crew ships, but not all. Some are still being brought up to spec, and some have it included in the co-pilot MFD layout. Damage control parties, which remember could also be the engineer in many a situation, would benefit from knowing where to pick up a fire extinguisher, many of which are located about the ships, carrying some fuses which can often be bought planetside, and carrying a multi-tool with the combination salvage repair module installed, or the big Cambio SRT if you're really serious about fixing stuff. In some cases, it may be useful to store spare components aboard, more on that later, and for those doing so, a tractor beam multi-tool could be helpful. And for some ships, it may be useful to place redundant fuses in the relay stations prior to takeoff. So moving on from what you'll need, let's talk about the gameplay, starting with the engineer role. The two key responsibilities for the engineer are managing the ship power to get the most out of it, and coordinating damage control activity. Power management is about putting power pips to the ship systems that need them. More power to weapons, more to shields, more to engines, and what have you. The precise power available at any given moment will depend on the individual ship, what components are fitted, and any damage taken or relays knocked out. It's helpful for the engineer to speak to other members of the crew, or the captain if you have one, to understand what the best use of power is. If you're out of combat and travelling, engines might make more sense. If your weapons capacities are draining too quickly, maybe adding some power there might help. In most ships, this will be a trade-off, taking power from one area in order to apply to another. And one such area you might take power from are the coolers. Each of the components, as well as having a power requirement, also has a cooling requirement, which need to be processed by the onboard coolers. Failing to do so will lead to an increase in temperature, the end point of which is either the component going offline to cool down, or worst case scenario, a fire. The engineer must also manage this cooling need of the ship in their power allocation. It's important to point out that doesn't mean that power can't be taken from the coolers ever. A good engineer will use all power available to them to manage the joint resources of power and cooling, but it does need to be actively managed to prevent overheating, which can damage components or cause fires. It's also important to point out that not all situations will want max power to everything. Some ships will want a lower power state in order to maintain a more stealthy profile, for example. Additionally, high power states increase wear on components, which we'll get to later, so sometimes running at a lower power state can be helpful. As a side note, when a ship has more than 2 shield generators, the third one doesn't add any extra value unless one of the first 2 has been destroyed. To help with managing power, the engineer can also save presets for each ship using the interface. These presets will automatically apply power in the way defined by the preset, so can be an effective way to go from a low power state to a combat state, for example. And these presets can be saved locally for quick recall later. Those presets will assume the same power state, so if your ship has a slightly different component loadout than stock, you'll want to make sure that your preset accounts for that. Likewise, if relays are out, the total available power might start to fall. So a big part of being a shipboard engineer is understanding the exact ship you're flying, and in what configuration, and in what damage state. Helpfully, the engineering terminal shows whether the ship is in SCM or nav modes, which might impact power allocation decisions. The engineer also has a good overview of damage control, able to visually see where components are taking damage, or fires are happening, or relays are out. This makes the engineer one of the best placed people aboard to coordinate repair activity. That could be done remotely in some instances, like opening doors to vent the atmosphere to put out a fire, or in some cases could involve directing somebody to a situation that needs addressing. So, being able to clearly and concisely explain what needs doing and where can be a key engineer skill too. And that brings us to damage control. The first responsibility for the damage control role is putting out fires. Fires can be caused by component wear, damage, or overheating. Whilst the engineer may be able to manage this remotely by venting the atmosphere, sometimes the better choice will be one or more people with a fire extinguisher. Most ships have extinguishers located around the ship, and so the damage control party can pick one up, aim it at the fire, specifically the component, and click to extinguish. Larger fires will take longer to put out. Once the fire extinguisher is exhausted, it can be recharged by putting it back on the rack it came from. The second damage control role is to repair components that have taken damage. This is done with a salvage multi-tool or Cambio SRT using RMC. These will need to be brought along before the journey. Engineers can see what components are damaged in the engineering screen to help coordinate any repairs that are needed. Taking the repair tool to a damaged component and hovering over it gives a tooltip of the damage, and then it's just a case of firing the tool to repair. It can sometimes be a little slow work, and multiple players can repair to speed things up where needed. Damaged components scale down in performance the more damage they take, so keeping components above 75% will keep them performing well. The final damage control element involves component replacement or fuse replacement. For relay stations, this will involve heading to a relay station and throwing in a new fuse, or more than one perhaps. These will need to be brought along prior to departure, or in a pinch, borrowed from another relay station. When a relay station is unoccupied, it glows red and reduces the amount of power available to the ship, so repair will often be a priority. When components' health reduces to 0, a replacement could be an option where available. This works slightly differently depending on the size of ship, but usually involves having spare components in the ship inventory to swap out to. Obviously, you'd need to have a spare available in order to do so, so this is likely to be more for those edge cases where you're so prepared that you brought spares. It's worth adding that having a load of extra expensive components aboard might make your ship a target for pirates, so perhaps consider bringing cheap spares instead to get you home in order to effect repairs without being a loot piñata. A word on damage control. This is Dan. Dan loves shooting things. Sitting in a turret and blasting away is Dan's favourite thing to do. But something awful has happened. A fire has broken out next to Dan's turret, and suddenly there isn't enough power to run it. Sure, Dan could hop out of the turret and put the fire out, but that's not Dan's job. Dan is here to shoot things, so we'll wait patiently for the engineer to run the length of the ship to fix things, even though it's less efficient for everybody. Please, don't be like Dan. Sometimes it will be best for the engineer to head out and effect repairs or put out fires. That's going to depend on the size of the ship, the situation at hand, and how many crew are available. But remember, when not at an engineering terminal, the engineer can't manage the ship power situation or see new problems developing. So making choices to flexibly use your crew where needed is key. You might not pull one of your Perseus gunners from one of the big turrets to replace a fuse, you might want to keep them shooting. But maybe it would make sense for the torpedo operator to hop away for a second to swap a fuse out, rather than the engineer running the length of the ship and losing the ability to manage power or see developing situations. These kind of judgment calls are all about working effectively as a team, communicating well together, and can be the difference between a win or a loss. If you've got a captain, they can help to coordinate that activity too. Finally, a quick note on wear and tear. Whilst components have a damage health state, they also have a wear health state. Damage is caused by combat, collisions, fires and the like, and can be fixed up using multi-tools. Wear is the slow and steady accumulation over time, which will necessitate repairs at a station. Smaller components can be swapped over in flight, but only if you're carrying spares. And running at high power settings will increase wear on components, so part of the engineer role will include lowering power during peaceful times in order to eke out more performance before needing an eventual repair. Hopefully, this has been a useful video guide on the initial implementation of engineering in Star Citizen from somebody enthusiastic about it. If so, you might press that like button or share your experiences in the video comments, especially if there's anything you'd like to hear more about. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, clicking that whilst you're there might be a wise move, but otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.